Here with Mr. Miroslav Lajčák, President of the General Assembly. Thank you for coming. He'll start with some opening remarks, and then after that, we'll take questions. So if you want to ask a question, just get my attention, and I'll call on you. And if you could start with your name and your media outlet, that would be great. Sir.
Good afternoon, and thank you for coming to this first press conference. I hope that it will be followed by many. I'm here for you and at your disposal. So it's our plan to hold regular press briefings. We've wanted to have this one shortly after the end of the general debate, and I think it would be appropriate to start with some assessment of the debate from my perspective. What I want to say is that it was for the first time since 61st session that we had all the member states and all the observers taking the floor. So we had 196 statements. We had 77 heads of states, 37 heads of government. We had 60 ministers, and the rest were vice presidents, deputy prime ministers, and so on. Out of curiosity, I may say that the longest statement took 43 minutes, was delivered by the president of the Observer State of Palestine, and the shortest statement took 5 minutes. It was delivered by the president of Lithuania. Yes. Now, the topics that were mentioned most frequently by the leaders from the podium: sustainable development, by more than 140 speakers. Climate change came second. Terrorism, nuclear weapons, and here the reference was made to the DPRK in particular. The issue of the UN reform was mentioned very frequently by many speakers, and then also the issue of migration. These were probably the most frequent topics, most commonly mentioned by the speakers, but there was also a significant reference to peacekeeping, peace building, and interestingly, a number of people spoke also about the new Cold War. From my perspective, I want to acknowledge positively the fact that the theme of the 72nd session, focusing on people in striving for peace and decent life for all on a sustainable planet, was in general well received by the speakers. Many of them referred to this theme. Some of them structured their presentations according to this theme, and they spoke positively about it. What I also found very important and positive was an overwhelming support for the United Nations role in peace and prevention, in upholding human rights, gender equality, the rule of law, and also the general support expressed for dialogue and for inclusivity as our working method. There was also very strong support for multilateralism. It was said by many speakers that we are stronger together. So this is, I believe, very appropriate for the United Nations statements. From my perspective, I was personally chairing some 20 hours of the general debate, and for the rest I had members of my team in the room who were reporting immediately and directly to me, so I basically took part or am familiar with all the statements, which gives me a good feeling and good impression about the overall debate. Apart from that, I had close to 60 bilateral meetings, and I had some almost 30 speaking opportunities at different side events. So we concluded the session, the general debate yesterday, but there is no break. We continue with the program of the 72nd session. Today we held the high-level event on the abolishment of nuclear weapons, and tomorrow and day after we'll have a high-level event on combating trafficking in persons. All 6 committees will start their work soon, and I plan to address all 6 of them at the beginning of their mandate to share my priorities with them. And of course, then we will proceed with the programs and with the priorities as we outline them. And I can repeat that what I see as particularly important issues for the 72nd sessions, there are 3. First, sustaining peace and prevention. So I want to focus more on what can we do and are not doing what tools do we have and we don't use them, what tools are we missing, and we need to adopt them to prevent conflicts. And there will be a series of events dedicated to this agenda, and the highlight of the program will be a high-level meeting on sustaining peace and prevention in April next year. But I don't want to see this, and it won't be a one-off event, but it will be rather culmination of a process and still not end of the process. The second extremely important issue that will be very visible and dominating the work of the 72nd General Assembly is migration. As you know, we have been tasked, mandated to prepare the Global Compact on safe, orderly and regular migration that is to be submitted for the adoption in September 2018. We are now entering into the decisive phase of the process. After several rounds of informal negotiations, we will conclude this process of informal consultations, then switch into the second stage, which is a stock-taking process that will take place in December in Mexico, and then after New Year we will launch the intergovernmental negotiations. That should lead us to the drafting and adoption of the text. I see this as an extremely important issue because, as you all know, migration, of course, is an issue that affects life of almost every citizen of this planet. Everyone has his or her personal experience, and United Nations as a global organization was asked to provide a global governance, global framework to address this issue. So therefore the expectations are high, and this will be also a very immediate first test, I would say, of the 72nd General Assembly already in September 2018. Being aware of the importance and sensitivity of this issue, I will be fully involved in the process. I will put all my political weight and authority of my office behind the process. I'll be chairing a number of meetings, and I'll be taking an active part in a number of meetings. And I also use my bilateral meetings with leaders to draw their attention to the importance of this issue and ask them for their support. And the third issue that will be somehow very visible and linked to the 72nd session is the issue of UN reforms. So as you know very well, apart from the ongoing processes on General Assembly revitalization and the reform of the Security Council, Secretary General will present his 3 reform proposals on peace and security architecture, on development architecture, and on management. And then it will be, of course, for the General Assembly and for the member states to discuss. And I support this process and the plans for greater efficiency of the United Nations. So I see my role in generating the widest possible support from the member states for the Secretary General reform. Of course, there are many other things: implementation of sustainable development goals, national reviews, reviews of individual SDGs, implementation of the Paris Climate Agreement. We will launch the decade of water for sustainable development in March 2018, and there are many other issues. I've mentioned these 3 in particular because all 3 are pending. All 3 are the issues that are important. There is no question about that. But we do not have a strategy to implement. We have to draft the strategy. So that's what makes our role, this 72nd General Assembly, particularly important on this. This is probably when it comes to the work plan. On other issues, I want to inform you that I have formed a team of external advisors. I've approached internationally recognized personalities, asked them to help me with my task pro bono. So it's not a paid position, but I want to benefit from a huge experience and knowledge of these people, and to discuss the priorities of the 72nd General Assembly and to seek their advice from their perspective. There are 15 personalities. The list will be distributed to you in case you are interested, representing all 5 regional groups. And I shall meet with them several times during the 72nd session, and I really hope that they will provide a valuable input to my work and to my mandate. My final point is about transparency. I want to assure you once again that we are committed to the highest standards of transparency, and the office of the President of the General Assembly is already run under these highest standards. So I believe that you will find all the information of your interest on our website. There is nothing we want to hide from you. In case you have any questions, feel free to ask about it, but I really believe that all the personal issues, financial flows, and all the other issues that might be of your interest are on the website already and will be, of course, uploaded on the website. For your information, I submitted my personal financial disclosure to the Ethics Office yesterday. It was before the deadline that I was asked to do so, so it's now being processed and assessed by the structures in charge of this issue. So this is probably what I wanted to share with you at this point, but of course I'm ready to answer your questions. Thank you for your attention.
Any questions? Yes, first question goes to Anka Sherwin.
President Lajčák, congratulations on your first UN and only UN General Assembly. Thank you for this briefing, and on behalf of the UN Correspondents Association, we appreciate it. What was your sense sitting up there when President Donald Trump threatened to totally destroy North Korea? I mean, you are essentially, as President of the General Assembly, the guardian of the institution. And did the irony of a head of state sort of threatening to decimate another member state strike you as ironic? Was it strange, given the principles, the bedrock, the foundation of the United Nations being peace building, consensus building, and that sort of thing? And in addition, what sort of momentum do you think comes out of this GA in terms of specifically Security Council reform? It was mentioned by a number of heads of state, particularly from the African region, from the Latin American region. What's your sense of where we go from here?
Thank you. So it's actually this was my 14 or 15 general debate, but of course the first and only that as President of the General Assembly. Yeah, but I can compare. And in general, the process and the whole proceeding was smooth. I want to focus on positive aspects of the discussion. I don't think you expect from me to criticize anyone. That's not my role. I'm here to speak on behalf of 193 member states. When it comes to the presentation of President Trump, I also had a bilateral meeting with him. And the things I want to outline in particular are his focus on peace. And he also said we stand together for peace in his speech. Focus on people, and I commended him for that because that's exactly my priority. Reform, strong support for the UN reform, and we also discussed the priorities as I just presented to you, namely the issue of migration, and I asked the US delegation to play an active part, an active role. When we speak about the reform and Security Council reform, yes, this is an issue that is very visible also from the outside. And for many people, it's the benchmark by which they judge the readiness of the United Nations to reform. By now, I've met with, I think, all the groups who are actively taking part in the discussion about the Security Council reform. And let me stress 2 points. First, of course, it's a process that is fully in the hands of the member states. It's an intergovernmental process. And my second point is, when it comes to what I wish to see, it's a credible process. Credible process that member states can believe. So we don't want to create an impression that we are wasting time pretending we are discussing something without believing in the outcome of this process. So and it would be good if at the end of this credible process we will also have a meaningful progress. So these are my ambitions, but while fully respecting the role of the member states.
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much for the opportunity. I'm Waldo from Prensa Latina. My question has to do with what happened in the debate and also with what happened here this morning, the issue of the nuclear weapons and the demand to eliminate them. What plans do you have on this matter during the 72nd session? And on the topic that you mentioned of the terrorism, how the GA can help to approach this issue and its root causes during this session? Thank you very much.
On the elimination of nuclear weapons, well, we had a very important event during the general debate last week when the treaty on the banning the nuclear weapons was open to signature. More than 120 countries have, well, supported the adoption of the treaty, and more than 50 countries have signed to that treaty on the very first day, which shows a very strong determination of many countries all over the world to achieve the ultimate goal, which would be the world without nuclear weapons. At the same time, we are also well aware of the fact that not every country is on board, and particularly the countries that possess the nuclear weapons are not on board. What I wish to see the process continue. Right now, we have two tracks. We have two processes, because we still have the NPT regime and the CTBT, that means the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty organization, that is yet to be established. We still have not reached the necessary number of member states for this treaty to enter into force. And then there is the new treaty. What I don't want to see would be the competition between these two tracks, because it would be to the detriment of everyone. What I wish to see is that they mutually reinforce each other by sending a very strong signal that this issue must be addressed seriously, because it's a majority of member states who have spoken out very clearly in favor of the abolishment of nuclear weapons. Speaking about terrorism, well, it was the General Assembly who adopted the first global counterterrorism strategy in 2006, and this strategy will be reviewed during the 72nd session in the course of 2018. So that means we do pay attention to this agenda. As a matter of fact, terrorism and migration are two global phenomena that affect lives of our people and are not globally regulated. We are still missing the legal frameworks. We are missing the proper tools to regulate and to govern, to be in control of these phenomena. We welcome the fact that the new office of the Undersecretary General for Counterterrorism was set up, and the person was appointed to lead this office, Undersecretary General. And his main task, I believe, or the immediate task, would be to streamline the work of the UN agencies that are dealing with counterterrorism, because right now we have 38 UN agencies that have the counterterrorism as part of their portfolio. So the streamlining is more than necessary. And we, of course, will be willing to receive the new Undersecretary General in the General Assembly to have him present the results of his work, because he will have to submit it to the General Assembly. So this issue is very important and will be present on our agenda during this session.
Yeah, Evelyn, good.
Thank you, President of this General Assembly. Evelyn Leopold, Huffington Post contributor. I have a couple questions for you. The Syria Investigative Committee, do you have a timeline for when they're going to produce something? And secondly, when you're talking about reform and you speak to the Fifth Committee, how are you going to phrase that? Because that's where you have wealthy countries who want to lower their contribution, and you have other countries, not so wealthy, who don't want to see a job being cut that comes to their country.
First, on Syria Investigation Committee, I don't have a timeline, but I know and I can assure you that the adequate attention is being paid to the issue of Syria, and of course, General Assembly stands ready to support the work that is going on in Geneva, the discussion in the Security Council. There are signs of hope with regard to the process, and we will do all we can to support these positive signals. When it comes to the Fifth Committee, it's a very popular address in the UN system, and it's seen as some kind of Ministry of Finance, which is not popular among the government agencies in all the countries. At the same time, their role is to protect the budget and the fiscal stability of the country. So what is important is that the priorities of the Fifth Committee are similar to the priorities of the United Nations. So that's very important, but being strict on the budget is what we expect from them and what we demand from them. So that's I would encourage them to continue doing job of the guardian of the budget of the United Nations, making sure that the money spent are money well spent.
Yes, go ahead.
Joseph Klein of Canada Free Press. Just going back for a second to your bilateral with President Trump, could you provide a little bit more details in the discussion that you had with him on migration, sort of what his response was, particularly in light of the recently announced new travel ban and other restrictions on immigration that he's pursuing? And secondly, one of the major themes of his General Assembly speech was national sovereignty, and he said that the nation state remains the foundation for international relations and confronting common problems. Can you sort of indicate how you react to that, given that the Charter does talk about protection of sovereignty? Thank you.
Yes, we did speak about migration, and I presented my perspective on the process that lies ahead of us. So I told him what are the expectations and what document we want to adopt. I said that it's very important that the United Nations shows that we are in charge when it comes to addressing global problems and global challenges, and migration is a global challenge. And I asked the U.S. delegation to take an active part in this discussion. So there were no immediate comments. I think that President Trump was listening carefully to my vision of this process leading up to the adoption of the Global Compact. And I believe it was a fruitful exchange, or fruitful discussion on this issue. To your second question, what is important from my perspective is the fact that President Trump spoke in favor of a strong United Nations, of UN reform. He said also in our meeting that he believes that UN is capable of doing more, and we shall use the full potential of the United Nations. And for me, this is encouraging.
Yes, please go ahead.
Mr. President, I am Deepak Arora.
Mr. President, I'm Deepak Arora, diplomatic editor with the Tribune Online, New Delhi, India. First of all, I was very happy to hear that you're very specific on some of the issues, important issues which you have picked up. One of them is terrorism. And way back several decades ago, India has been insisting on a definition of terrorism. How much priority do you give it to it? Do you think you'll be able to achieve this under your leadership?
Right now, I really believe that this issue should be addressed to the Undersecretary General Voronkov, who is now tasked to deal with the issues of terrorism, and we shall proceed step by step here. And when it comes to the efficiency of the UN system, I really think that the most important thing right now is to have a better coordination of the UN system when it comes to addressing the issues of terrorism, better clarity about who is responsible for what, and then to proceed with other issues. But I would be stepping into his shoes if I tried to answer your question, so I'm sure that he will be willing to give an answer to this. But the General Assembly is ready and willing, of course, to provide any kind of support to him, to his office.
Yeah, Matthew, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks a lot. Matthew Lee, Intercity Press, on behalf of the Free UN Coalition for Access. Thanks for the briefing. And I actually, on transparency, I just wanted to have a question, which is how much time you think you'll devote to your role as foreign minister while you're here, or is it just a ceremonial role? How will that work? And also, just even as to the website, for your daily schedule, which is great that it's up, it doesn't seem to be archived. And I just wonder, since the information is already typed in, this may be more for Brendan, but to have it so that if people want to see, like, who did you meet with the month before, it seems like it's just the day itself and then it disappears. Maybe I'm wrong, but it seems, so that's just I'm just throwing that one out there. And the sort of substantive question about the debate was, you may have seen this at the end in the rights of reply. There was this issue of one delegation from Pakistan showed a photograph. They said it was Kashmir. India said, no, that's from Gaza. Seems like, he said, she said, except that actually the photograph has been shown to have been about Gaza, and I don't think that Pakistan, in the quotes they've given publicly, they haven't disputed that the photograph was not what it was purported to show. So I understand you wouldn't want to get dragged into every dispute on the floor, but is there some sort of factual baseline that you'd like to set during your year in terms of people, just if they make a mistake, correcting it, in terms of not an opinion statement, but the use of a photograph depicting something that they didn't say that it was? Thanks a lot.
First, on the role of the foreign minister, I made it very clear that I'm not going to exercise my role as foreign minister during the year that I'm president of the General Assembly. We made it very clear, so I have my deputy appointed who acts instead of me. So there is and will not be any conflict of interest or anything. With regard to program, I think it's just a technical issue because, once again, I think it's also in my interest that you know what do I do, whom do I meet, where do I travel. So we have nothing to hide. And the third question, it's really not for me to answer. It's for the delegations that are involved. And again, I want to use but not misuse my position of the President of the General Assembly. But I will certainly think about your suggestion.
Thank you. Mr. Sato, yes.
Thank you for this briefing. Sato from Japanese NHK. My question is about DPRK and the disarmament. The President just said that some of the member states mentioned about DPRK. We also monitor some of the member states' speech, and as well as the condemning the North Korea's nuclear test and missile launch. Most of the countries expressed the serious concern about the escalating the situation. How serious have you perceived the international anxiety about North Korean issue? The one more question is that I attended today's International Nuclear Abolition International Day, and unfortunately some of the nuclear holders didn't attend and to say nothing about it. So could you tell us a little bit about your prospect for upcoming the first committee, disarmament committee? Thank you.
The issue of DPRK, nuclear and ballistic tests, was very much present, of course, in a number of statements, and I mentioned this to you in my opening remarks, and also very much present in my bilateral meetings, including with President Trump, with Prime Minister Abe, with Foreign Minister Wang Yi. I also met with the Foreign Minister of DPRK, and I conveyed very strong concerns of the international community of number of countries that are particularly affected, and I also urge him very strongly to abide by the international rules and to respect those rules. And I also made a very strong point of the fact that Security Council voted in unanimity more than once, which is a signal that cannot be ignored. I think everybody understands the gravity of the situation. And I also made a point of stressing that this war of words must not turn into a real war. And it's also mentioned in every Security Council resolution that we need a political solution. So I pushed also my partner from DPRK to do their part, to switch from the current track, which is escalation, into the track of diplomacy and political process. That's what we have to do. And there is one more thing I want to say. No country can resist such a strong and united stance of the international community.
Yes, please go ahead. Oh, sorry.
Sorry,
Yeah,
and
sure.
on
the first committee as well.
yes, well, I'm going to address the first committee very soon, within next coming days, 10 days, and I think we received two very powerful messages. One from the opening ceremony, the signing of the treaty, and then from today's high-level event. So the expectations are high. At the same time, as I said, we have two tracks now, and I don't want to see these two tracks competing. The NPT track and the so-called nuclear ban treaty track competing. We should rather make sure that they work towards the same goal.
Yes,
Yes, and Charles, Baltic Review. Regarding the statement made by the President of the Republic of Lithuania, Dalia Grybauskaitė, in the GA, in which she said, as we speak, around 100,000 Russian troops are engaged in offensive military exercise, ZAPAD 2017, on the borders of the Baltic states, Poland, and even in the Arctic. As president of the GA, how concerned are you about the Kremlin's aggressive behavior, which includes the illegal annexation of Crimea, its direct participation in the war in eastern Ukraine, and attacks against Georgia in violation of the UN Charter?
As President of the General Assembly and as a human being, I strongly believe in the international system that is based on the rule of law, and the system that this rule of law is respected by everyone. And I also believe that we shall be very much united in condemning any violation of the rule of law. So that's what I see one of the main roles of the United Nations, to help us to set the universal system of law, of rules, and also, of course, to help us to protect this system. When it comes to military exercises, what is important is that there are already international rules about how to conduct them, how to inform about them, how to have them monitored. And here it's really important that all these exercises are held in strict accordance with these rules, so that there are no question marks or no doubts about their real purpose or about the substance.
please go ahead.
Thank you very much. How much focus and impact will you have on what appears to be total disconnect, the Chinese-Russian proposal for suspension addresses the concerns of both South Korea and North Korea, and the North Korean ambassador in 2006 said North Korea would not need any nuclear weapons whatsoever if they were not subjected to constant threats, these ongoing South Korea and United States military exercises, which are actually described as now as decapitation units. So how much, there seems to be emphasis on one side of the sanctions, but absolutely no concern given to the requirement that the U.S. and the ROK and Japan take into consideration the concerns of North Korea. So will you be able to have any impact on this? It seems to be, in fact, when Sergei Lavrov was here, he said basically they have nobody's taking their proposal seriously, and they have no alternative.
I had many opportunities to speak about the issue of DPRK and its behavior in violation of international norms. I also drew everyone's attention to the fact that we, United Nations, particularly the Security Council, in our resolutions and documents call for a political process. Secretary General himself made it clear several times that there is only, or there can be only, a political solution to this urgent problem. I have my regular meetings with the Secretary General, with the President of the Security Council, where obviously I intend to raise this issue. At the same time, I respect, let's call it division of labor among the UN bodies, and right now this issue is being handled by the Security Council, and the Security Council is fully seized on this issue, which I respect, and there are clear results, unanimity, which is not a small thing. So we as General Assembly, and I as the President of the General Assembly, stand ready to help when we are asked to do so. But right now I really don't think that there is a need for proliferation of initiatives or players because the issue is prominently featured on the agenda of the Security Council.
Great. Last question.
Thank you. Mr. President, during the GA, you met with both representatives of each country, Kosovo and Serbia. President of Serbia started an internal dialogue while President Tadic is trying to form the unity group. What's your impression about their ongoing dialogue and affairs? What did they say? Are they going to do a full force to it, or they're just going to drag it?
Well, my impression from the meeting, both Mr. Vucic and Mr. Tadic, was that they both understand the importance of a dialogue, of a serious dialogue, and also of a dialogue that delivers concrete results. So there is a platform for this dialogue, and they both are committed to continue meeting in Brussels and discussing important issues and implementing these issues. So from that perspective, and I also made this point very, very strongly, that the world wants to see them engaging further in the dialogue and wants to see the dialogue delivering concrete results.
Should there a time frame?
This process.
How long it should go, or?
Well, let me stress 2 points. First, I respect that this process is run by the European Union and by the High Representative Mogherini, so I don't want to impose any views or any limits on her work. Second, my personal diplomatic experience tells me that setting timeframes might be counterproductive, because then we may become hostages of these timeframes or deadlines. What is important that we do not drag on, as you said, that the process continues. That's really important.
Thank you, everyone. And we have the copies of the President's team of external advisors here if you're interested in the bios.
Thank you very much. Have a good day.